Welcome back once again, Goon Squad, to another live edition of the Football Goons podcast. We're absolutely pumped this week because we have another live viewing audience with us, and because we're now a mere 4 days away from the NFL draft. I don't know about everybody else, but it feels like Christmas morning to me when the NFL draft comes. If you're watching and listening live right now on any of the platforms that we are out there on, we want to encourage you to submit some questions into us, and we'll potentially read some over the air during the broadcast as long as they're pertaining to NFL draft related content. As I said, we'll answer absolutely as many as we can. This week, we're looking at making some final predictions for the 2017 NFL draft. Let's get right into it and talk about some risers and fallers. This is a popular topic this time of the year. Everybody's got connections to some kind of a scout out there. So let's take a look at some players that we think will likely either move higher up the board than most people are expecting or fall further down than anyone imagined originally. We're going to go around the room here and discuss. So let's toss it around here.
So the guy I had here I thought about Jonathan Allen because he's had a major slide recently. Almost every mock over the past 3 months or so had him easily going top 5. A lot of people had him going number 2 to the 49ers or number 3 to the Bears. Now, in a lot of cases, he's dropped out of the top 10. But the guy I really wanted to talk about a little bit was Malik McDowell. He's a guy that we've seen almost unanimously in the top 20 to 25 on almost every big board. He's been a guy, as far as inside guys, pretty much the highest guy anybody's had, but I think we can bet on him not being top 20 and probably falling out of the first round. In the mock we did last week, we had him not even making not even making the first round, when a lot of guys have him as a top 20 talent. And it's not really a matter of talent with him because the talent's there, but it's a matter of need and just depth at other positions. So I look for him to not even be in the first round, which is crazy considering where he was just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think the knock on him has actually been not so much talent, but you hear so much about which McDowell are you going to get, and he tends to quit when the team's behind. When Michigan State was struggling this past season, he came out and played well in the first quarter, and as they trailed, you got less and less effort out of him. So, a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight and a lot of what you just think about when you see the draft is – we as fans sit here and say, take this guy, it's worth the shot. But my job's not on the line. It's easy for me to say, please take Reuben Foster. But if he turns out to be an idiot and he gets suspended or some kind of crazy stuff, then that's a problem. So it's easy for us to sit here and say, yeah, Malik McDowell's really good and he's got a boatload of talent. But if my job's on the line, do I want to risk it that a guy isn't going to try? If we're not a great team, if he goes to the Patriots, then good for him. They're probably going to get an all-pro. Right. But, if he goes to the Browns, he might be one of the worst players on the team.
I think that the league is pretty tainted recently with guys like that have had the world of talent, but have just given up on their team or fallen short because of, personal decisions. So I think that everybody's a little jaded at this point to say, I'm not going to take a risk on a guy like that when there's so much other talent available. It's not like he's the only one.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum for teams out there. Another thing that I hate hearing all the time is people will say, well, how much does this guy really love football? But I think in this instance, you really have to kind of question that, because the knock on him is kind of, as we mentioned, he does tend to give up when the team is not playing well. He's had some off the field issues, obviously, that teams are looking at, but teams investigate that kind of stuff. They know well beforehand whether or not, this is going to be a player that they're going to look at. So the interesting thing that I think that you mentioned, though, was it's largely going to be needs-based, because there are so many talented defensive ends, guys that can be versatile, move inside a little bit or whatever, that it really just pushes out a guy who's really, really talented when he wants to be into the second round, is what I think it really just boils down to.
Yeah, and another part of that is that if you're a GM, it's harder to sell that first pick, and it's the only thing you did on Thursday, and then all day Friday is his press conference, and here's a guy, and your fans are saying, is he going to care? Whereas if you can take, one of these other talented players in the first, and then take him on Friday where you can kind of sneak it in and be like, listen, we might have just gotten 2 first-round picks.
Right.
It's easier to sell that to your owner, your fan base, and everybody who matters versus, we got all our hopes riding on you. You got to get it done.
Yeah.
I was going to say, to agree with South 100%. For me, it's strictly a versatility thing at this point. I mean, he is an inside, defensive lineman. He is what he is. There are so many guys who are inside defensive linemen but can move to a 4-3 D end, or vice versa. They're an end who can play D tackle a little bit for you and get after the quarterback on from multiple positions. McDowell is what he is, and that's not a knock on him because he does it very well when he's at the top of his game. But would you rather have that, or would you rather have a guy who can, play inside, play outside, stand up if you need him to? That's the difference for me. It's not so much that he's not good at what he does, it's that he's limited in what he does.
Right.
All right, so continuing around the room here on another player, who do we have next?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I'm going to go with, a Goon favorite. We kind of all like this guy, and I think if he ended up on any of the 3 teams we root for, we'd be okay. I like UCLA's Takk McKinley a ton. I think he's a complete package as an edge rusher. And the thing I like is he's a little more scheme versatile than some of the other pass rushers kind of in his group. Everybody kind of chalks up Myles Garrett as number 1. Great. Solomon Thomas maybe number 2. But then you get those Barnetts and Taco Charltons. Those guys are going to 4-3 teams. Like, it's hard for me to envision Taco or Barnett standing up. And then you got a guy like Charles Harris, who I'm not sure where he fits in. And these guys kind of are more scheme specific, whereas Takk, I could kind of see him doing either the odd or the even front edge rush, and I think it'll go really well. The guy's work ethic is second to none. If you're into the draft, the shows and his YouTube stuff and his first draft and all the things that nerds like me watch, where he came from is not something that he just takes for granted that he got out, and his attitude is awesome. How many times watching tape you watch a run play go away from him and he chases it down 40 yards downfield. And it's rare to see that kind of guy with elite talent also have the motor of a guy who's just trying to get noticed. Like, he has the attitude of a practice squad player with first round caliber play. So, that's something you can't even say about a guy like Myles Garrett. The only knock on him is he takes plays off, and he's just, he makes those splash plays, but where is he the rest of the time? Takk doesn't do that. I think he fits great as an every down player in a 3-4 coming off the edge, no doubt about it. In a 4-3, he may need to put on a little weight. He's about 250, but he's always played a little stronger than that weight. I think any of these 3-4 teams, like I said, need to be in love with him. And the thing with Takk is, I'm not talking about a 5th rounder here. He's a first-round pick. You look mocks across the board from months ago, even, when we've been doing our mocks on the site, he's consistently in like the late 20s. That Dallas range, Atlanta, teams like that looking into Takk. I actually think he's hands down going to be off the board in the top 20. This might be a little shocker. I think his ceiling is the Jets at number 6. I won't be shocked if that happens, but I think more than likely we're going to see him be a Saint at number 11 or a Colt at number 15, Takk McKinley.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned about early on about, the work ethic. And I watched a profile on him not too long ago. I think that something that teams are going to absolutely love is the character of this guy. I mean, this is one of those guys that with all the nonsense that we hear coming into the draft, this guy has some domestic abuse issues. This guy has some drug issues and things like that. This is by all accounts as squeaky clean as you can get. And then when you add to that the high level of play that you're getting on the field, I think that's why you're right, and that he could jump a number of guys at that position, because there's very few questions about that. You mentioned some of the areas where there might be a little bit of concern, but this is the guy in this draft who is going to work to erase every single one of those concerns.
How refreshing is it for us, too, that we finally get to talk about a guy that we like? He's going to be a very, very good player, and we don't have to talk about all the junk and baggage that he has. It's nice for us.
It's almost weird.
Yeah, it feels awkward. I'm gonna dig around. I gotta find something on this cat.
But see, like I really think you can dig, and you're obviously joking, but like, is there a player in the first round conversation, maybe outside of Christian McCaffrey, that you'd be more shocked if like the Laramie Tunsil video surfaces on Thursday and it's tack? Like, you'd be shocked.
Right.
You know, if it's Garrett, fine. You know, and I don't want to speak to everybody's character. I don't know all these guys, but just from all the stuff you see, he's either the best faker in the world, or you know, you'd just be shocked to see it come out. So again, going back to my thought of, if I'm a GM and I can take a shot on somebody, at least I know this guy's going to give me what he's got. And if he doesn't have the talent, then we just evaluated you wrong. But he's not going to let me down.
I can't believe on Thursday we're going to be talking about, oh, man, did you see that Tack and Tim Tebow were smoking out of a gas mask together?
All right, Rocco, let's see who you got for us as far as risers or fallers go.
All right, so I'm going to hit you guys with a faller right now. Reuben Foster. I'm just going to jump right into it. I mean, this guy is, by all accounts, he's a top 5 talent in this draft. And, I mean, people have said he's like, you know, could be the second coming of a Ray Lewis type of linebacker. I've heard analysts say that he's the best linebacker they've seen in 5 years when it comes in terms of sideline to sideline, you know, from the middle linebacker position. But we talked about this briefly. You get into a fight with a doctor at the combine, and you just put that red flag out there. And we're like, you know, it's probably nothing, but you're just giving teams a reason to question. And now we find out, you know, a month later that it's because of this quote unquote failed drug test, or, you know, I forget the exact terminology they use, but it's the diluted sample. Yeah, the diluted sample. And, you know, he claims that, you know, he was sick and he was extra hydrating and taking medication. And I'm not saying that that's not a reason, but now there's another question mark in teams' heads. And it's, you know, he from all accounts, from what I've heard, he cleared his medical check, his second check, or actually his first check, because he got sent home from the combine in the first place. But, you know, when they call back these draft candidates for second checks, you know, Foster came in for his first check and he cleared everything. And it seems like, you know, everything's there. I think he's going to wind up being a faller. And no, he's not going to fall out of the first round. But this was a potential top 5 pick. Then it was a potential top 10 pick. And now we're probably talking about Foster falling to 15, maybe even, you know, the late teens range, you know, based on need and evaluation. And this is a guy that, from a talent standpoint, should absolutely be a top 10 pick. And he's not going to be, because he's put question marks in people's heads. And that's terrible. I feel bad for him, but at the same time, I don't. Because how many times have we talked about this as a group, and people have said it? This is a job interview, and you're screwing up your job interviews. Like that's what this is. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to show up. You know, Miles, I loved your comment to us earlier on today, you know, that if you were an agent, you just lock these guys in a room for a month and not let them do anything stupid. But, like, I mean, that's how I feel. Like, your one job is to not make yourself look like an idiot for a month. And now you've done this potentially twice. So Reuben Foster's my faller. I still think he's going to be a fantastic player. I think somebody in the late teens is going to get lucky if they can make sure that his head stays on straight in the NFL, and, you know, isn't a hothead and doesn't have any drug issues. Somebody's going to get very lucky to get him in the late teens, more than likely. But, you know, what a potential, you know, loss of money for Foster, and already starting his career with somewhat of a red flag and a black mark.
Here's where I'm a little hesitant on some of this stuff, you know, over the last couple of weeks. With if he was going to fall, and I'm not disputing that he may, you know, obviously I don't have any inside knowledge on this, but teams have directors of securities on every sideline in every organization. They've been digging and digging and digging on these players for so long. And then when a report comes out about a diluted sample or whatever, you have to believe that on the day that happened, every team's director of security was red flagged on that. So we're getting the news significantly later, but I think that teams already have their decisions on a player, or their minds made up on a player character-wise, way before we're getting all these stories. Even this Joe Mixon story that came out this week, teams are already, you know, in the know on these things. And if they're not, shame on them. I'll just kind of throw that out there as a disclaimer, I guess.
Yeah, I did hear one analyst say that this diluted sample is not like, or us finding out about it now is not like last year with Tunsil, because that came out, an hour before the draft and teams had to scramble quick to figure out what they were going to do. Whereas now, even if the teams did know about it and they found out at the same time we found out, they still have a week to do their homework. So that's why I said I don't think he's going to fall. We saw Tunsil fall from the number one prospect to
13.
13.
Right.
This is a guy in Foster who, his ceiling was probably 5 or 6 a couple of months ago, and then we started talking about it more, and he's probably in that 10 to 15 range. And now I'm saying it's probably going to be it could probably be a little bit lower than that. So, like I said, I don't think this is a drastic, well, now he's not first round draftable, but at the same time, it all goes back to me for like, why are you putting questions in teams' heads?
Right. Yeah, and I'm going to purposely leave this open a little bit because I know we had a question that came in on this, so we'll have a chance to kind of elaborate a little bit more on specifically what we think is going to happen. So I'm going to move on right now and jump into a guy that I think is rising up draft boards, probably more within the organizations than we realize. And that's Jordan Willis, defensive end out of Kansas State. Here's a guy who, at the beginning of the draft process, quite honestly, he was probably a third rounder, late second rounder in a lot of teams' eyes. Some people may have pegged him, earlier on in the second round, but I didn't see a whole lot of that early on in the process. And to be honest with you, he really wasn't even on my radar. And then he has his pro day and the combine combined, and all of a sudden teams are starting to take notice of this guy. Here's a guy who has a massive build. He's a monster. He's strong. And the biggest knock on him was that he was a stiff player, so he can be moved around a little bit. But when you look at the landscape of college football over the last couple of years, a lot of the dominant tackles are coming out of the Big 12. And that's a conference that this year, Jordan Willis destroyed the tackles in that conference. There was no question about it. He led the nation in hurries this year from the defensive end position out of all the players in the entire country. So his workouts have been off the charts. The pro day eliminated any concerns that teams might have had about his athleticism. He ran faster than any defensive end that I saw. His vertical was only second to Myles Garrett. So the physical, work, the quote unquote workout in your underwear, he passed that with flying colors. And when you go back and watch the tape on this guy, I'm not sure where we missed it, but he's just disruptive in every phase of the game. I don't think that this is a guy who I'd be shocked if he went in the first round. I think his ceiling is probably as high as like Detroit, as far as teams that are looking for, edge rushers, defensive ends. But Detroit, Green Bay, Dallas, Atlanta, New Orleans, they're all teams that are going to be looking for a defensive end or a pass rushing presence. So I'm not going to be shocked at all if, based on the athleticism and the strength and what he showed in all of his workouts, that he moves up into the first round there.
Just off the top of your head, don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you think of any guys that we've kind of assumed are going to be in the first round that he's going to pass up?
Off the top of my head, I could think of probably 2. There's some mixed feelings out there on Taco Charlton, which kind of hurts me to say that, but
yeah, I can see tears coming to your eyes there.
Teams are questioning a lot with Taco, and then you have guys like Tack, who he could move way up the board, or he could kind of stay in that same zone as Willis. Depending on the teams and how they grade these guys individually, these defensive ends are all over the place.
Yeah, it's just there's 20 positions every year, not 20, but there's multiple positions every year that it's like there's a general consensus media and fans board out there. And like on none of that is Jordan Willis above Taco Charlton. But all it takes is Detroit to think that, he's the second coming behind Garrett, and they're going to take him. Yep. There could be 31 teams out there that like Taco more, but the one that likes Willis more is going to take him. And that's the thing that, like, as fans and even analysts that are somewhat plugged in are like, oh, we can't believe he went, so early. well, that team loved him. And that's all it takes for a guy to get into the first round conversation. But I do like Willis, and I think you nailed the analysis there where he seemed like one of those guys early on that it was like, yeah, he had a ton of production, but we're not sure it translates to the league when you have to be hyper athletic. You can't be stiff and
right.
It's one thing you're saying Big 12 tackles have been all the rage. Yeah, great, but you're going to play an elite tackle every single week. So then when he answered those questions, I think early to mid-second is where I would place the guy, but you can't be shocked. All it takes is one team, like I said.
Hey, Miles, you said you're going to play a great tackle every week. That's except the weeks that you play the Jets.
Okay. But it's one of those things like we're saying you can have a terrible tackle in the NFL and he's still better than 99% of college tackles.
Yeah, I know. I'm just
as a player, it's just like the Jets have an awesome quarterback situation if you compare it to the MAC. It's just bad.
But not if you compare it to the Big 12.
Rod, I was very careful to say the MAC.
Yeah, you had to pick a lower level college, division.
All right.
Sun Belt.
Yeah. Now that we've discussed some players who could be shuffling around the board on draft night, let's dive into some teams who could be doing some moving around as well. Coming off of last year, when a total of 8 first-round trades were made, how do we see trades shaking out this year?
Yeah, I'll jump in here, and I'm going to hit you with a team we hear a lot from every draft year, even to the point where they made a movie about the team moving around, as unrealistic as it may have been. I'm going to hit you with Cleveland. I actually think the Browns here are going to trade back into the top 5 for their quarterback. There haven't been many teams, like I said, in recent history have moved around the way the Browns have, shown a great deal of aggression, moving up, moving back, especially the past 2 years where 2015 they moved from 4 to 9. Last year they trade back from 2 to 8 and then again to 15. And we have a plugged-in Browns fan who complained the second they trade back because they keep being terrible and not getting elite players for their troubles. They're like, yeah, we're really bad, and we're going to trade back to like the average players too. It doesn't make any sense. So it's time. I think they're going to flip the script here. We've talked about how internally they're arguing whether they want Myles Garrett or Mitchell Trubisky, and it seems like Hugh Jackson, as the coach, wants Garrett. Front office kind of wants the quarterback with Trubisky. I think they're going to get them both. I think that number one is going to be Myles Garrett because they're dumb if they don't. Whether or not he's the best player in 5 years, who knows? But he's definitely the best player on Thursday, so you got to take him. But then they have 13 picks in this draft and next draft. They're going to use some combination of that. It starts with number 12 and probably number 33, and you can go from there. And they're going to hop up into the top 5, and they're going to grab Mitchell Trubisky as well. So the good news here for Cleveland fans, they have more than enough ammo that even if you're one of these like, oh, you can't trade mortgage of the future, okay, you're not, because you can trade a first, a second, a third, and a first next year, and you still have a pick in all those rounds. So They're not going to crush themselves the way a lot of other teams would to trade up. I'm not sure the total compensation, like I said, 12 and 33 will be involved, but I think both Myles Garrett and Mitchell Trubisky are going to be Brownies by about 9 o'clock on Thursday night.
Yeah, and you heard coming out of Cleveland, when they interviewed them earlier in the week. I love these interviews the week before the draft. Like they think that these GMs and owners and coaches are going to give away their philosophy. But they did come out and say that eventually you've got to start making moves on these picks. You can't just keep stockpiling. And they did say that they thought that the time for stockpiling was past. So it'll be interesting if their actions back up the talk that they had earlier in the week.
It has to, because you figure 26 picks in the next 2 years. Like, you don't have half of a roster to waste on rookies and first-year players. So, like, at some point, you need to start trading up and turning 3 good players into, like, one guy you really can use to win. At what point do you stop just being the Sixers here with your assets and just collect it? You got to win at some point. So I hope it is for them. The time seems now, because you can give up, like I said, a couple rounds of picks and still leave the draft with 9 really solid players.
Yeah. The important thing is that they eventually start, like, it's nice because they're so bad to have collected these picks in the first place, but now they have to do something with them.
Yeah, don't take Justin Gilbert and Johnny Manziel in the first round.
Exactly. And you know what? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Mitchell Trubisky is going to be the savior and franchise quarterback for them. I don't think we know that yet. But the point is, take him and find out. You know what I mean? Like,
the thing I'd love to know is you hear the arguments that Hugh Jackson wants Myles Garrett, and I'd love to know, is it because he says dummies Myles Garrett needs to be the pick, or is it that he doesn't think Trubisky's any better than Cody Kessler? You know, like I would like, and obviously if they do what I'm saying here, we'll get the answer to that. Like, Hugh's not going to sign off on, give away 4 picks to get a guy I don't like. You know, how dumb would the front office be to have to argue there? But I'd be interested to see what he thinks of him, or if he doesn't like him, or it's just, hey, it's Garrett. We need Garrett.
Yeah, that's my whole feeling with this whole thing anyway, is like the argument keeps coming back to, are they going to take Trubisky instead of Garrett? I feel like the front office knows what Hugh is. And if Hugh said, like, this is not the guy, I really think that they would honor that. I don't think that they'd be like, no, he is. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, Hugh has to at least think that Trubisky has the potential, and that the question is in his head on whether or not they should take him. Otherwise, I feel like this would be a null point. You know, Hugh more than anyone has to feel like he can do something with Trubisky,
right,
in order for that to be a legitimate argument.
All right, Rocco. Well, while you're on the topic of talking through this trade, why don't you give us what you got?
All right, so I was going to hit you guys with Miami, but we hit you with that last week in our Goon mock draft, and we caught some slack for it, but I still think it's a very viable option. But this week, I'm actually going to go with the Oakland Raiders. One reason I think this is going to happen is I think that even though I did hit you guys a little bit ago with the fact that I think Foster may fall, I really, really, really think that the Raiders want to address this linebacking core. I think they want to get stronger in the middle to go along with Mack and Irving and kind of like shore up the middle of that defense. And I really think they want to go linebacker. And I think that we could see, I'm not going to call it a run on linebackers because, there aren't that many in the first round, but you got Reuben Foster, you got Jared Davis, you got Zach Cunningham. I think that if they think that one of those guys is the difference maker, I don't know which one it's going to be, but I think they could think enough that one of those guys could be the difference maker for their defense and feel the need to get up into the late teens just to make sure they get them above the Miamis of the world, above the Detroits of the world. So that's where I'm going with this one. Like I said, I don't have a specific player in mind because I don't know where they value each player, and I'm not going to pretend to know like I have insider information on the Raiders, but I could definitely see them addressing that linebacking core and jumping up into the late teens to make sure they get their guy to really solidify the middle of that defense and really make a push at what should have been a deep playoff run this year. Now that Carr will be back and the rest of that team will be in order.
Yeah, I like when teams like Oakland this year make a trade like this because you're a team that's a player or two away from being a true Super Bowl contender. It's almost like what Atlanta did. Now, they did it to the extreme when they hopped up, I believe, from like 22-6 to take Julio Jones. I mean, that's a bit more than you're saying Oakland's going to do, but they felt like they were one elite player away. So let's go get him. And then I don't care if we wasted 3 other picks because we got the guy. And if you're Oakland, I mean, you're 1 or 2 stud defenders from being an AFC favorite. So if you need to trade up to get, like you said, whichever one between Davis, McMillan, Cunningham, and even Foster that they want, then do it. Who cares what you're giving up if you think you're that player away?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the key thing for me is that people will say, how could you give up more picks or, all this other stuff or lose value later on in this draft? But that really doesn't matter if you value one of these guys that highly that you think they put you over the top moving forward. So I couldn't agree with you more in that sense.
I think the other thing too is I think we kind of forget you're only allowed to have 53-man rosters. You know what I mean? So acquiring all these picks, although great in theory, like at the end, you only get 53 guys on your sideline. So you better make sure that those 53 are the ones that you want and not the ones that you have to field the team with. You know what I mean? So that's why I said, if you think that one of these 3 guys is the difference maker, or 4 guys is the difference maker for the middle of your defense, then you trade up to get him.
Yeah, so interesting that we do have Salvador Cortez is commenting on our feed right now. He says, Reggie loves to keep his picks, but he did say he won't hesitate to trade up if a guy he loves is available. So, that's, I'm guessing, a Raiders fan speaking in on that. And again, it goes back to what we're saying, that if they love that guy, it's going to be hard to crack the roster, as you're saying, for that team because they are so deep just about everywhere. So again, that just speaks to go and get the guy. If he's there, move up.
It's one of those things where, we have this history of Reggie keeping his picks, but Oakland's not been in this scenario before where, if, like you said, if Derek Carr doesn't break his leg, I mean, they're probably AFC West champions.
Yep.
They're certainly not throwing Connor Cook out there in the playoffs. So while a guy has shown this history, it's because Oakland throughout his time there has needed as many picks as they can get, versus now it's like, hey, let's grab one guy. Let's do it. Let's go after it instead of just building more and more depth. You're a winner now. So now go out and get that last pick to get a trophy.
All right, I'm going to jump in here with the trade that I've been thinking through quite a bit over the past couple of weeks. And if you believe everything that you read and you look at all the different visits that guys have been taking, nobody has done more homework on this quarterback class than the Buffalo Bills. The owner was present at just about every workout, that they had, especially with Mitchell Trubisky. Wanted to make sure that I mentioned Mitchell, not Mitch. So he was there with every single workout. Doug Whaley as GM was there, present for every single workout. The coaching staff, they've been doing their homework extensively on him. The team has made no real commitment, nor really do they have to, on Tyrod Taylor beyond this season. And even at, some would say that it's significant money that he's getting, but for the market that is out there right now for starting quarterbacks, it's really not that significant. So, I mean, you can kind of flush that away or try to move him or whatever you need to do. Most likely to do this, they're going to have to target Tennessee at number 5. I think Tennessee is the most likely candidate in the top 10 to move back. Obviously, they're a team that's on the brink as well. But I think some guys that fit their needs the best, they'd be better suited to slide back a little bit and get even more ammo to add to their draft haul. So I think that they have to move up and get ahead of number 6, because as much as we hear about the Jets not really being interested in a quarterback or wanting to move back, you've got to just kind of take that at face value. You have no idea what they may do at that pick. And it's been a popular trading spot destination for other teams to try and move up ahead of Buffalo at their original number 10 spot. So you're going to have to give up number 10. Most likely, you're going to have to move number 44 in a pick. So you're losing potentially your first and second pick to move up to number 5. But the Bills are a franchise that is absolutely desperate at this point to get that next franchise quarterback. We talk about it every year. It seems like the talent is there. No team in the league is as established as just a dominant running game as the Buffalo Bills are. They proved it last year, being the leading rushing team in the league. They've got some weapons on offense, obviously. The defense, yes, they do need some work, but I think they're going to turn a corner this year. So you've got to try and get your quarterback. We talk about this all the time. Everybody says, well, the cost is way too high. You do not win in the NFL unless you have the quarterback. So if they believe, as it's been reported and indicated in a variety of different areas, that Trubisky is the guy, then you've got to make the deal. You've got to move up to number 5 with Tennessee, and you've got to pull the trigger on him.
Yeah, you think about last year, what team had the owner at every single quarterback workout? Your beloved Philadelphia Eagles. Jeffrey Lurie was at every single one. And all that meant is they traded from 13 to 8 to 2 and took Carson Wentz. So the last time the owner was everywhere, there was some substance behind that. These guys aren't wasting their time flying from Buffalo to North Carolina to check this guy out.
No. And no less multiple times.
Right,
so.
Right. And to build even further on that, I kind of went off on this last year about the Eagles mortgaging their future, and speaking from as a fan, like ask any Eagles fan right now if we're mad that the second round pick last year got traded away to get Carson Wentz. Like, I'm not upset. I don't care who they would have taken in the second round. We have a potential franchise quarterback.
Right.
So, and obviously the burden of that is eased a little bit by getting a first for Sam Bradford somehow. But, the point is, you talk about mortgaging future. If you get Aaron Rodgers, who cares what else you could have had?
Yeah.
You're a contender every year.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard this draft season alone, I bet you the Browns are kicking themselves for not just sitting and staying where they were and taking Carson Wentz.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if you think that he's the guy, then you go get him. And you know what? I disagreed with that last year, but I agree with it now. If you think he's the guy, you got to take him and deal with it if he's not. But you got to take him. Here's my question for you, South. Do you think if we get to 6 and Trubisky's still on the board, and the Jets don't think that he's the guy, do you think the Jets would be the candidate to trade with the Buffalo? Do you think they would actually give them a potential franchise quarterback?
That's such a tough call. I mean, you so rarely see that within a division. This is just me speaking, but I don't think you can do that. Wow. Even though you're going to get some more picks or whatever, you're sliding back 4 spots. You might get as I mentioned, their second round pick, but you're going to regret that twice a year, maybe 3 times a year for the next 10 to 12 years.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I agree wholeheartedly because
I disagree.
I disagree too.
Well,
I mean,
see,
you've already said that your conviction is he's not the guy. So why are you concerned with giving not the guy to another team?
Okay, your conviction is he's not the guy, maybe for you. But do you want to give your division the guy that might be the guy for them?
I think it depends on your assessment. Like, are you saying when it's real semantics here? Like, if he's not the guy for you, but you think he might be the guy, then no, you don't do it.
Right.
But if you don't think he's the guy for you because you just don't think he has it, and that's, I mean, like, these guys aren't making these decisions. They're not making these decisions on a whim. Like, that's not based on, I just don't like the fact that he wants to be Mitchell instead of Mitch. We'd have liked him if he was Mitch. But, like, if you genuinely study the tape and make this evaluation to the point where you're like, this guy is not a franchise quarterback, then absolutely, because you don't regret it twice a year. You celebrate it twice a year.
Yeah. Okay.
You got Trubisky on the schedule. There's a dub.
Yeah.
Okay, but here's my question. Do you think, and I don't want to say that like there's got to be some psychological game that goes into it with these coaches and GMs. And do you think like the Jets get up there and they're like, all right, we don't want to pick Mitchell Trubisky? Why do the Bills want to take him so bad?
I don't think so. This isn't me and you in fantasy where I just own your brain.
We go through this crap every time. Every time I try to trade with you.
Yeah, this is legitimate. Like, I don't think anybody's getting swayed because, well, Buffalo likes him. Did we miss something? No, you know how you feel. Like, you know how. I do it in a heartbeat.
You do it in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
I would.
If I don't, I'm not saying specifically this situation, but like if I'm the Jets and I don't, because here's the thing, like we're saying, oh, for my team or your team, this is a franchise quarterback. he either is or he isn't. So if he is, then you take him.
That's my point. So like you're saying,
give him to Buffalo.
Okay, so you don't. Okay, maybe this is hard because like you're not in the middle of it, and I don't know that you've ever been in the middle of it in your entire fanhood career. Like giving that potential guy, even though you might not think he is, giving that potential guy to another division opponent and then getting beat by Tom Brady twice a year. I mean, I know Tom Brady's extreme. You guys know I do that, but okay. But no, like honestly, there's no other example of this that I can think of off the top of my head. But like to give your team the guy that they think is the guy, and even though you don't, and then listen, if we do this and Mitchell Trubisky comes out and beats the Jets twice next year, and then maybe even twice the following year because the Jets are still bad, you might as well all your coaches might as well quit. Your GM might as well quit because they're going to get fired because they're going to say, how did you pass on this guy?
It's a risk.
So
it's a risk I'm willing to take if my analysis tells me this guy's not a franchise caliber quarterback, and I can get probably a guy I would have targeted at 6 at 10, and now I get an extra top 50 pick.
That's what it comes down to for me too. That it's bigger than we don't think he's the guy. It's, well, I'm not going to draft him, so another team's going to draft him. So what if I have to play him twice? I'm still getting what I wanted plus more when I don't want him anyways.
Especially in this class where you're risking Trubisky might be there at 10 if Cleveland doesn't hop. So then the Bills got him anyway. And you didn't give him to him, but you didn't get 44 out of it.
Right.
You could have.
Yeah, so we will move on for the sake of time. But so what I'm getting out of this whole conversation is that if the Jets have him as the next Christian Ponder, they cannot accept that trade fast enough.
Right. Right.
All right.
And if for some reason they have him as the next Tom Brady, they should maybe consider taking him.
Just draft him.
Yeah. All right, Teal, give us a trade.
All right, so I have almost no doubt in my mind that the 49ers are not selecting number 2 this year. Now, I've seen a lot of mocks where they take Lattimore, Allen, or Solomon, and I said in my last mock from a few weeks ago, I'd be more surprised if they drafted Jonathan Allen than if they didn't draft number 2 at all. And that's not a knock on Allen. It's just that they have so many other glaring needs on their team, a team that Kyle Shanahan is looking to give his identity to, that why would they make one pick from defensive end, as good as he may be, rather than gather some more picks in a round, in the first round and then later in the draft? Listen, nobody thinks that the 49ers are a corner or a defensive end away from being good. They were the 31st worst offense and the worst defense in the league last year. So they need as many picks as they can get in this deep draft. And I think it's a no-brainer for them to trade out of number 2 and just gather picks in this draft.
Yeah, I think that's a viable option for them too, especially if you're talking about a first rounder next year.
Right.
Because you may be looking at it from the perspective of, okay, we don't necessarily care for some of the quarterbacks that are out this year, but we want a chance at Sam Darnold next year. So why not, if you're going to get a future pick? And I'm just throwing that out as a name. There are several names that I'm sure will come up before this all happens or whatever. But if you're going to get a future pick as well, that's a no-brainer to me because you already have 10 picks this year.
Right.
What if, Deal, let me ask you a question. Would you do it? Would you still be excited about the prospect of it if it's like, let's say, for Cousins? And I don't think it will be, but if Washington decides that they are going to move Cousins, do you do it if it's just Cousins for 2?
I don't know that would be a real offer, but yes, I would, because he is my franchise guy. So if Cousins was available to draft number 2, I would take him. So yes,
I agree. I just want to say I agree 100%, but I just want you kept saying, you're going to acquire more picks and, they're not one player away. But in this case, this is one player for you. It's essentially like you're taking Cousins with the second overall pick in a situation.
Exactly.
Yeah, and tell me Kirk Cousins wouldn't be the number 1 prospect in this draft. Like, obviously not as a college player, but you sitting here, put him on the board right now, Cleveland would take him first. There'd be no discussion.
Sure.
So it's I've gotten to a point where there's virtually no question that I'm not answering yes to, that it's like, what if you get a franchise quarterback? Yes, I would do it.
I'll trade everything.
Right. Like, tell me, we keep picking the Jets. Like, tell me they wouldn't trade this entire draft class for a guaranteed franchise quarterback.
I would right
now.
You know
what I mean? So tomorrow. So it's like, yeah, you give up number 2 because you still get to pick 34th. And, now you have a direction.
All right. Well, we're going to try and move into a different topic of conversation here. Now that we've discussed, some players and trades that are going around, let's wrap up this portion of the podcast doing what we tend to do best, making some wild predictions that most likely aren't going to come true, but it's fun to speculate and it's fun to do anyway. And if it does come true, then, we'll be pounding our chests and telling everybody we know about it. So
Mine is.
well, maybe it is. Let's start out with Rocco because we know he likes to go to the most extreme. So let's set the bar really high here.
I do go to the most extreme. Like when I said Ezekiel Elliott was going to lead the league in rushing last year. Oh, wait. Got him.
But
All right,
did
so
he hit the rookie wall? I forget.
yeah, South, remind me. At any point last year, did Ezekiel Elliott hit a rookie wall?
Yeah, the divisional round.
Wow. Wow.
Zing.
Got him. All right, so we've been talking pretty extensively on these podcasts for weeks now about how deep this cornerback class is and how we're going to see some slides and how guys that are normally, top 10, top 15 talent are going to hit the second round. In the last week, I've kind of flipped my philosophy on this, and my wild prediction is that we will see no less than 7 corners go in the first round. That's right, I said it's 7. All right? I'm not going to give you specific names because, like I said, everybody's draft board is different, but some combination of Lattimore, King, Conley, Awuzie, White, Jackson, Humphrey, Wilson, and maybe even Tease are going to go in the first round. It's so deep, but what I see happening is I see somewhere around the mid to late teens a run starting to develop and teams going, oh, man, I got to make sure I can get my guy. Oh, Miles talked about it last week. Oh, we're gonna reach here for a guy that might be a little bit lower on our board because we think he fits our needs better. Oh, well, that's going to cause another run. So I've kind of flipped my mindset on this. And although I thought, we could see a lot of these guys fall, I'm going to go with no less than 7 corners taking in the first round of this draft.
That's certainly interesting. A lot of those.
That's the best you had to say.
I'm just trying to.
South really made that anticlimactic. I was
trying to process.
7 are going. He's like, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. For sure.
South, you might as well said, all right, and the next one.
All right, and the next one. We'll move it along here because we are gonna run short on time. But I'm gonna go next here. We alluded to this just a few minutes ago with Kirk Cousins, but my prediction is that Kirk Cousins is traded to the San Francisco 49ers. And that's not crazy, when you take that at face value. But the crazy part is that the very minimal amount that the 49ers are going to end up having to give up in the long run here. I think he gets traded for the number 2 overall pick for Carlos Hyde, who the 49ers are trying to move. The Redskins, they got Fat Rob, but is he the guy? Who really knows? He's got a cool nickname, but beyond that,
I like it.
What do we really know? And for a conditional 2018 pick that could be as high as a second rounder based on Kirk Cousins' games played, his performance, things of that nature. See, the 49ers, they've got time to build here. They've got a new regime that just took over. So they've got a little bit more leverage here than a lot of people realize. They're not desperate for this. They don't have a GM who's on the way out or a head coach who's on the way out who's got to make a move here. The Redskins, on the other hand, pretty much have to eat or be eaten, so to speak, when it comes to Kirk Cousins here. He's going to walk away next offseason regardless. I don't see that many teams throwing bounties at them right now. So they've got to go ahead and get something for him. At this point, it does not seem at all like anything is going to happen between those two parties. It seems like it's going to be an ugly breakup and they're going to go their separate ways. Obviously, that kind of haul, so to speak, is not what the Redskins would have originally hoped for. They're getting significantly less than they threw out there when they said it was going to have to absolutely blow them away. It's nowhere near what they spent for RG3 either, which I think they have visions of getting as a return for him. The Skins would have 2 picks in the first round this year. They'd have Carlos Hyde added to the fold with a pretty decent, offensive line in front of them and a potential second rounder next year based on, some of the performance metrics with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins would get to move on to where it sounds like by all means he wants to play in San Francisco. He'd be reunited with Shanahan there, and he'd get a fresh start. And then as the 49ers, yes, you are giving up a little bit there, but you just got Kirk Cousins, which we exhaustively talked about. If he was on the board, you'd take him there anyway. And then you still have 9 picks in this draft to build around him, a very deep draft. So this is a scary proposition for the 49ers, who all of a sudden probably have a lot more leverage than the Redskins do.
Yeah, I like it because I'm a Carlos Hyde fan, but it does seem like from reports coming out of there, they kind of want to get rid of him. And this is a nice draft to fill kind of that Devontae Freeman type player. There's a couple of them out there that San Fran could then use one of those later picks to address. So, but it all boils down to, you got the franchise quarterback. So yes, we'll give up, anything somewhat reasonable with which your trade is more than reasonable.
Right. All right, let's keep it going around the room here. Deal, what do you got for us?
So my wild prediction is that I'm more convinced than ever that Joe Mixon is going in the first round of the draft. Now, I know we got a question about that. Do we see him moving up? There's almost no doubt in my mind he's a first-round draft pick this year. There's so many reasons. If you haven't watched his highlight videos, go ahead and pause this podcast, come back to it, but in like an hour after you watch some of his highlights, you'll be about 3% through his reel if you watch for an hour. So the dude's unbelievable. Another reason is so many teams in the league have been suspiciously quiet on him. They haven't been mentioning him. They haven't been saying one way or another. And it almost seems like they're just waiting for him to fall to them. The team that makes the most sense to me, I know I picked Christian McCaffrey to go there, but the Buccaneers make sense for him to go. They seem to have no problem bringing in guys with past. They notably drafted Jameis after all of his debacles in college. They brought over Deshaun, which although he's distanced himself from his past, he's still been very vocal about having ties to some guys in gangs. And they just have that kind of demeanor there in Tampa Bay. And they seem to be a kind of a team that's in a small enough market that's kept clean enough that they could get away with it. Another reason is the dude actually seems like a decent kid. He made a mistake. It was a huge mistake, one that's inexcusable. But it's a long time ago. He's trying to make it right, and he deserves a fresh start like everybody. And really, he's just good, man. He's just a good running back. Last season, he had 1,812 yards and 15 scores, not to mention 494 kickoff yards and a score. And not to mention a dude named P. Ryan was on his team and also had 1,166 yards and 13 scores. So he took tons of attempts away from him. Listen, this is a bold prediction right here. Joe Mixon is Le'Veon Bell without the miles on his legs. He didn't have all the runs that Le'Veon Bell had when he was in college. He has less miles because he had the help of P. Ryan there. And he has all the potential. He runs the same, and he has similar yardage minus P. Ryan's yardage. Was a better receiver than Le'Veon Bell. So this guy absolutely should go in the first round.
Any guess how high?
I hope number 15. That would be perfect projected for me. No, I really think that Tampa Bay is going to take him. Even though I still kind of like Jeremy Hill, it would also make sense for him to go to the Bengals. They have no problem bringing in guys with a past. So I would not be shocked at all if the Bengals took him. I would say, yeah, that seems right.
So, Deal, let me ask you this question. Is this a Joe Mixon is better than everybody else, so he jumps into the first? Or is this
Absolutely.
a situation? Okay,
You
so I was going to say,
you don't have to.
I was going to say, is this a situation where the top three that we've been talking about are off the board, and now Mixon goes?
I think Leo. I'm not positive if he's better or not yet. I mean, man, I love Mixon. I've been I literally probably watched like 6 hours of film on the dude this week. But it's really a matter of I think he's that much better than McCaffrey and Cook.
Yeah, I think it goes back to this, kind of to wrap this up a little bit too. Like we talk about this all the time. It depends on how the teams have him and view him. So they've done all their homework on him. You gave him a comp to Le'Veon, which is very flattering, obviously. His other NFL comp that I see all over the place is David Johnson.
That's not a bad one either.
Also not bad, yeah.
And you're throwing around those kind of names for this guy. It's just, it's crazy. So I'd be shocked personally, but I wouldn't be shocked based on, totally based on some of those things.
But realistically, though, you said everybody has their evaluation. Nobody really has a negative evaluation other than he made a bad mistake 3 years ago. What else is there bad to say about the dude?
It's an owner's call. It always has been. I said it a couple weeks ago. There's not a scout GM in the universe that doesn't have him as a top 20 player on talent alone. It's a matter of, is your owner willing to swallow it? Is your coach willing to hear it? Are you willing to put this guy up in your PR department and hear him interviewed? And are you willing to deal with all that to get the production on the field? Somebody's going to be.
Yep. All right, Miles, on that note, why don't you round us out on this topic?
So I think this is just it's a fun topic, but it's kind of strange because, even to us in the general public or those that are somewhat plugged in, even there's players every year where we're just way off on. It's like comes out that this guy was top 15 on everyone's board except everyone in the media and the public had him in the third round. It's just stuff we don't know. But the one that's been coming out recently that I buy into, I think Gary Conley of Ohio State not only going to be the first corner selected, he's going to be the first defensive back selected in this draft. As incredible as Jamal Adams and Malik Hooker are as players, you can't deny it's been proven over and over and over again. NFL teams have this history of valuing corners over safeties. If you have a safety that's a 10 and a corner that's a 9, you're taking the corner. It's just a more important player. So even a little talent gap isn't changing that. So when you measure Conley against even his college teammate Marshawn Lattimore, where most of us say Lattimore's the guy, he's the number one corner, there's the obvious upside that Lattimore has elite potential, but Conley's just that safer pick. And for the third time tonight, I'm going to say, if your job's on the line, are you going to take a guy top 5 who already has a history of soft tissue injuries, which are not like freak injuries? Some people's muscles tear. It's not like, you broke an arm, you might do it again. That's not what we're talking about here. Hamstrings are going to be one of those things where if Lattimore doesn't erase that, he's missing 4 or 5 weeks a year. Conley doesn't have any of that, and he still has elite potential. You've heard multiple people come out and say lately that the more they study this tape, 3 years down the line, Conley may be looked at as the best corner in this draft. I think there's going to be a GM up high that, again, my job's on the line. Do I want to take a safety? Do I want to take an injury-prone corner? Or do I want to take a safe pick that I know is a good player and may end up being better than the 3 guys that everyone has ahead of him anyhow? So on most people's boards, he's already the number 2 corner. I think without a doubt, he's going to come up there. He doesn't have the position problems of Adams and Hooker. He doesn't have the injury history of Lattimore. Safe and solid, keeps jobs in the front office. So he'll be the first of many quality defensive backs that are taken this weekend. I think he's a top 5 pick.
How many, Rocco?
I said no less than 7.
So there you go. So 7 corners, and not including, I'm assuming, 3 safeties that you think will be taken. So 10 D-backs in the first round. I think Conley's the first off the board.
That is correct, sir.
All righty. Well, we hit on some crazy predictions there. Now we just want to, before we wrap things up, touch on a couple questions that have been submitted by you, our faithful listeners and watchers. The first one that we want to hit on here is from Dan. Hit us up on the Facebook. He asks, is Nathan Peterman from Pitt worth a team in the back end of a second round taking a chance on early, or does he fall to the 3rd or 4th round? Would be a sneaky good fit for the Steelers, was the comment that he made. Any thoughts on Peterman?
I think Peterman, everything I've seen on Peterman and everything I've heard from analysts who've watched him extensively have said that he might be the most pro-ready guy to come in and, for example, I've heard this repeatedly. If Houston passes on quarterback in the 1st and takes Peterman in the 2nd, they'll be fine rolling into the season starting Nate Peterman, because he's pro-ready enough already with Bill O'Brien. So I think absolutely his ceiling is going to be mid-second, I think, and more than likely he'll be gone before the end of the second, no matter what at this point.
Yeah, the thing I like a lot about Peterman is the way he played in the big games. That Pitt doesn't have a ton of big games, but this past season he always played well against Penn State. But the fact that he went into Death Valley and beat Clemson the same season they went on to go ahead and win the national championship, to go into their stadium and beat them with the way he played, I think that's something that if I'm an evaluator, listen, obviously if you don't have any talent, then fine. If you just rode your running game or whatever to that win. But Peterman was the cog that made that win happen. And for me, listen, I can fix some mechanics issues. That's why I have a quarterback's coach. That's why I have an offensive coordinator. And this guy does have solid talent, but the things you can't teach are stepping up on big moments. And Peterman did that. So you don't have to fear if you're the Texans or you're a playoff team. Is he going to choke when we get to the playoffs? Well, clearly no. He beat the national champions. It's something Alabama couldn't do, and Peterman did it. So
yeah, no,
I like him.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I didn't watch a ton of Pitt games, but they did have a couple national games. Every time that it came down to the fourth quarter in those tight games, Penn State, Clemson, he was poised, he was in control. And, at Pitt, he knew his role. They were a run-first team, but he was responsible with the ball. You can tell that he was making a lot of calls on the field. So the coaching staff had a lot of faith in him. So to go to part two of that, where the comment came in about the Steelers, I think a team like that is almost ideal. You don't have to throw him into the fire right away. He gets a little bit of time to kind of develop, as an NFL player, because until Ben gets hurt. But, you've got Roethlisberger, by week 4, but you've got Roethlisberger for the foreseeable future. So there's no hurry that he has to be the guy to shoulder this thing right away in a situation like that. So I think that's an excellent fit. I'm not sure that I would do that at the back end of the second round. But again, it's going to depend on how things are falling. If you like him as a player and the quarterbacks are going, then you're going to have to make a move on him. So it's going to depend on how things are shaken out.
See, I think Pittsburgh's like the ideal situation for that too, because let's just say Ben gets hurt right before the playoffs start. This isn't like a Houston situation for last year or an Oakland situation from last year where you're like, oh God, we gotta go into this and we don't have any idea what we're gonna do at the quarterback position. At least you know what you're getting with Peterman, and you know that he can come in and play well enough to not lose you the game.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I do obviously watch a fair amount of Pitt games, and last year, they only lost 4 games, not including their bowl game, but losing the 4 games in the regular season. None of them were because of Peterman. So you have to like that in a guy that's not playing at a huge school, but none of the losses were from him. And Pittsburgh would be a nice fit for him, but I would like to see him go home to Jacksonville, and he's a good guy that could sit behind Blake Bortles. And if Blake Bortles somehow remembers how to play football, I don't see it happening. He can sit and wait for a while. Or like many analysts have said, he's a guy that can be pro ready right now. So he can be thrown in the fire if Bortles is the same Bortles we've been seeing. So I like him to go to a place like that, especially if he falls to the 3rd round.
All right, then just one last question here before we wrap this thing up. I've seen this come in from a variety of different people, but we're going to give Eric the credit on this one. Just really quick answer here, Cliff Notes version almost. What do you see happening with Reuben Foster coming off of this diluted sample story? I kind of saved this from when Rocco was talking. Just give me an area where you think he lands, or maybe a team.
I don't. Yeah, Rock already kind of hit that he thinks he's going to slide. I stayed quiet there because I don't think this is going to change anything. I think the thing that may knock him down some boards is the reports that he's been interviewing horribly. When these teams want to meet you and find out who you are, they're leaving less than impressed. But for me, the fact that he weighed in far below his playing weight, I buy his story completely. That he was just sick. People told him he looked sickly, so he started panicking and trying to put on a bunch of water weight. And that's why it's diluted. I buy that. And maybe I'm a sucker because I like the guy and I want him, but I buy that story. So for me, he's undoubtedly still a top 20 pick. I won't be surprised if nothing changes. We just picked on Joe Mixon. I won't be shocked if the Bengals still take him. They don't care at 9. But I think all the landing spots we've been talking about to this point, 9, 11, 14, 15, are all still on the board for me.
Yeah, I actually agree with Miles here in that even if it wasn't a diluted sample, the story is believable enough that you can sell it to everybody. Right. So you can say, we believe him. We've tested him now. He's clean, and we believe the story from back at the combine. So the story, it's not like, well, I didn't actually punch a woman. Oh, crap, a video came out. So right. This is a story that's believable.
I actually think, if nothing more, in my mind, it eases him losing his mind at the doctor a little bit more, because it might be a situation where he said, this is the biggest interview of my life, the biggest job interview of my life. And you're kicking, you're telling me I failed a drug test when I didn't. You know what I mean? So as a young kid, that panic move. And listen, he's a linebacker. He's got an attitude problem. You can't play linebacker without an attitude problem. Right. So you ticked him off, and that's where he went. So for me, it actually eases my mind on, why are you yelling at a nurse? Oh, now I know why. Okay, I can deal with that.
Although he didn't punch a nurse, that's a good start.
No hitting.
Good start.
I think the whole thing is I said before he was going to slide. I did say that he would not slide out of the first round or anything like that. So, like I said, his landing spot for me would be like late teens. That's why I said that, is because this is a guy that, like I said, at max was going to go maybe 6 to the Jets. Potentially, more than likely, going to land in that 9 spot to the Bengals, 11 to the Saints. Miles hopes 14 to the Eagles. But I could see him falling out of that top 15 realm. And like I said, it's not going to be a drastic fall. We're not going to be hearing his name on day 2. But enough questions might have been raised to drop him to the low teens.
Yeah, I'm not going to prolong this any further. I'll just say this: he's not getting past 15. If he's on the board, when the Colts come up to make the pick, they can't get to the podium fast enough. So I just don't see him going any further than 15 at the absolute worst. And that's actually going to wrap up this live edition of the podcast. We hope that you are even half as excited as we are about the draft being just 4 days away. We would ask that you hit us up with comments and feedback. So you could do it right on this video here. We want to expand our presence on social media, and we need some interaction with all of you. So your feedback is certainly welcome. You can find us at facebook.com/footballgoons. On the Twitter, we're at footballgoons, and right here on our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, as we're going to be continuing to put some good football-related stuff out there, including fantasy football, over the next couple of weeks. Check out footballgoons.com as well for all of our mock drafts over the past several weeks. You could subscribe to the podcast on iTunes as well, so that you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll catch you next time.